The quiet mountains of Northern California, often known for their beauty and solitude, became the stage for one of the most perplexing and haunting mysteries in American true crime history. This was the story of the Yuba County Five, a disappearance marked not by violence or criminal plot, but by an unnerving confluence of confused decisions, extreme hunger, and a profound, unexplained silence. The five men were residents of Marysville and Yuba City, California, all in their 20s, and all sharing a mild to moderate intellectual disability. They were friends, all living either with their families or in supportive community housing, and they formed a close-knit group. Their names were Bill Sterling, 29, Jack Huett, 24, Ted Weiher, 26, Gary Mathias, 25, and Jack Madruga, 30. Four of the men had mild disabilities. The fifth, Gary Mathias, had been discharged from the Army due to mental illness, and his medication regimen was a key detail in the later investigation. They all participated in a supported work program, selling concessions at local events, and they were, by all accounts, highly interdependent and familiar with routine. The date was February 24th, 1978. The five men were in Chico, California, having attended a basketball game between California State University, Chico, and the University of the Pacific. This was a normal, pleasant Friday night outing. Their plan was straightforward: drive back to Yuba City, a distance of about 50 miles, and then prepare for a bowling tournament scheduled for the following day. Their mode of transport was Jack Madruga's car, a turquoise and white 1969 Mercury Montego. Madruga was known as the best driver and the most familiar with the local roads. They left Chico and headed east, towards the main route that would take them south to Yuba City. The subsequent events defied all logic. Instead of staying on the main highway, Highway 70, the Mercury Montego somehow drove north, veering deeply off course into the treacherous, snow-covered mountain roads of the Plumas National Forest, miles away from any logical destination. The car was eventually found 2 days later, on Sunday, February 26th, approximately 60 miles off the planned route, resting on a remote, deeply isolated road. The location was approximately 4,500 feet above sea level, accessible only after the men had passed through a locked gate to a Forest Service road, a gate they would have had to get out and physically open to pass through. The discovery was unsettling. The Mercury Montego was perfectly functional, its tank nearly full of gas. There was some evidence that the driver had gotten the car stuck in a snowdrift and had spun the tires, but the men had not stayed long enough to seriously attempt to free the vehicle. Crucially, the car was abandoned with the keys still in the ignition, suggesting a panicked, immediate departure, but a departure that offered no clues as to the destination. The immediate conclusion was that the five men, having gotten lost and driven far off course, had abandoned the car to find help, or perhaps to simply return to the main road. However, there was a far more disturbing detail. The main road they had passed hours earlier was only a short, downhill distance from where they had abandoned the car. If they had simply walked backwards on the road they had driven, they would have reached a populated lodge and clear highway within hours. The subsequent search in the mountainous, snow-covered Plumas National Forest yielded nothing. The men had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a functioning vehicle and no clear trail in the deepening snow. The search was eventually called off as the relentless winter weather made the terrain impassable. 4 months later, in June 1978, the snow began to melt, and the terrible silence was broken by a series of chilling discoveries that deepened the mystery into a psychological puzzle. The first discovery was made by motorcyclists near a remote campsite about 19 miles from the abandoned car. They found a Forest Service trailer that was intended to be used by hikers and had been stocked with emergency supplies. Inside the trailer, the remains of Ted Weiher were found. The scene within the trailer was beyond bizarre. Weiher was found covered in 8 sheets and blankets, having starved to death. However, he had not died immediately. He had survived for an estimated 8 to 13 weeks after the car was abandoned. The trailer contained sufficient emergency rations, dehydrated food, sea rations, to sustain all 5 men for weeks. Yet the food stores were untouched. Next to Weiher's body, the police found his gold watch and his wallet. The most baffling discovery was that the survivors, who had clearly managed to survive in the wilderness for weeks before Weiher's death, had used the trailer's propane tank to heat the small space. They had also burned all the available wood outside the cabin, as well as several books and magazines, to stay warm. Yet, the emergency food that was right beside them, clearly labeled and easily consumable, remained untouched. Weiher's feet and hands were severely frostbitten, indicating the long, agonizing period he had been immobilized, but the food remained preserved. The mystery deepened when the partial skeletal remains of Jack Madruga and Bill Sterling were found miles apart from the trailer, scattered across a wide area. Madruga's body was found just under 2 miles from the trailer, partially consumed by scavengers. Sterling's skeleton was found even further away, approximately 11 miles from the trailer. The remains of Jack Huett were found furthest from the trailer, identified only by his shoes and jeans, with his skeleton scattered widely, as if he had struggled for days before collapsing. The one body that was never found was that of Gary Mathias, the 25-year-old with the history of mental illness. He was the one man in the group whose specialized army training and prescribed medication would have made him capable of functioning independently, yet he was the only one who completely vanished. The evidence painted a grim and paradoxical picture: the abandoned car. Why would 5 men, with a full tank of gas and warm clothing, abandon a functional vehicle to hike deep into a snowy wilderness? The untouched food. Why did the 4 men who clearly used the isolated trailer for weeks, heating it, sleeping in it, die of starvation when a substantial supply of food was literally inches from their hands? The dispersal. Why did 4 men, known to be highly interdependent and requiring structured support, separate themselves into the wilderness, walking up to 11 miles in the snow, away from help? The prevailing theory among detectives and forensic psychologists is rooted in Gary Mathias. It is believed that Mathias experienced a sudden psychotic episode while driving on the remote road. His fear or paranoia may have been amplified by his lack of medication, causing him to insist that they abandon the car. The other 4 men, being dependent on routine and authority, may have complied with Mathias's intense command. The terrible discovery in the trailer, the untouched food, is attributed to a combination of group psychology and cognitive impairment. In a psychotic state, Mathias may have issued a command not to touch the contaminated food, or the men, overwhelmed by the break-in routine and relying only on the familiar, may have collectively refused to eat emergency supplies that were unfamiliar, preferring to burn books for warmth rather than consume the rations. This led to their eventual agonizing starvation, not due to lack of resources, but due to a catastrophic collective psychological failure. Gary Mathias, the only one who might have been capable of surviving, remains the key to the entire mystery. The most likely scenario is that Mathias, either responsible for the death of his friends through